Hi, my name is Rosemary Burgos Zimbelman, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Animal Nutrition Systems. Bringing this podcast to you with our vendors who supply products to animal nutrition and our feed mill and provide quality mineral supplements premixes for dairy producers and nutritionists in Arizona and surrounding states. Today we have Dr. Marissa Munson, who's a technical services veterinarian with Huvepharma. And we have Mr. Scott Koehn, the National Accounts Manager for Huvepharma as well, here joining us today. I've asked them to join us today on this podcast because I wanted to get to know who Huvepharma is, what they're doing, where have they been in regards to the U.S. So I think it'd be safe, Scott, if we started off with a little introduction of who you are, your background, and then if we can have Dr. Munson jump in after that.
Sure. Thank you for having myself and Dr. Munson, Dr. Zilman. We're happy to be here and hopefully give you and your audience some information about Huvepharma and Monovet. So I am, as you mentioned, one of 3 national account managers for Huvepharma. I focus in west of the Rockies. I was hired as part of the build-up and launch team for our new Munson product in the United States, Monovet 90. We were all hired, us 3 national account managers, in early July slightly, or just a little before our FDA approval, which came mid-July. So prior to this, I've served in various roles in the feed and pharmaceutical industry, as well as on the production side. I managed a fairly large dairy for a while in California and own again a small herd of beef cattle. So I've kind of been on both sides of the table and seen the industry from multiple angles.
Thanks for sharing. And you and I share something in common, right? You're a Cal Poly alumni, and so am I, from San Luis.
We do, yes.
Little different ages, but that's okay.
Go Mustangs. Yeah.
Go Mustangs. Dr. Munson, can you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So again, thanks for having us join you for your podcast. I joined Huvepharma as a technical services veterinarian. My background originally started as a clinical veterinarian in private practice, in a dairy-focused practice in the Pacific Northwest. And then I transitioned into academic residency training as well as teaching at North Carolina State University. And then I worked actually in the feed business and doing management consulting and ration work for Purina and Animal Nutrition, and that was primarily with herds and producers in the southeast U.S., and I currently call Raleigh, North Carolina home.
Nice. Must be pretty chilly over there.
Yeah, actually it's not too bad. We're in good shape right now. No snow.
That's good. Well, thank you for calling in and joining us and making time on the East Coast to join us. I appreciate that. So can you guys tell us about Huvepharma, where you've been on a global level, and what's brought you to the U.S. or what you have had present in the U.S.?
Sure, and I think that's a great way to start. So, our big splash into the ruminant side of things is just with this new product, Monovet 90, right? The Munson sodium product. But that doesn't mean that we're new to this market by any means, and we're sure not new to the feed business internationally. I think it's appropriate to mention that we're a company owned by one family, one individual, Kirill Domashev, headquartered in Bulgaria. Mr. Domashev is owner of several different businesses across multiple industries, and kind of interestingly, including a professional first division Bulgarian soccer team, FC Ludogorets. But back to the feed business, and where it all started is in the mid-50s is when Huvepharma started fermenting molecules, right? And that started primarily with the tylosin product, and then moved into other molecules from there, including Munson. So with the different compounds that we're basic in terms of manufacturing active pharmaceutical ingredient we like to include or refer to as API. We've been in the business for several decades now. New to the U.S. in terms of Munson, not new to the U.S. in terms of other feed ingredients, including Tylovet, as well as some other well-known brands and compounds, fairly well known to the market here, like Corid or Amprolium. We're also in the enzyme business, which isn't so big on the ruminant side, but in other species, for example, we have the market-leading phytase enzyme in the poultry sector. Marissa, anything to add to that I've left out?
Mostly that we've been around in the fermentation biotechnology space for a long time, since 1954. So while our business here in the U.S. in the cattle business space is comparatively newer, we've been around in, like I said, in fermentation-based product development for quite some time.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. So getting straight to the chase of Monovet 90, which is kind of the topic that brings you here today, mostly the product that I guess is mostly the new product for 2019. Can you talk a little bit about bringing that to the U.S. and what that took? I mean, we've been hearing for a very long time about possibly a generic Monensin coming out and waiting and kind of talk about what it took to get that product into the U.S. and why it took so long.
Yeah, so everybody was waiting a long time, including Huvepharma. So I think it was over a decade labor of love through the submission process to the FDA. I think Huvepharma would be first to admit stubbing our toes along the way and how we did certain things through the submission. But eventually, after, like I said, after 10 years or possibly even a little longer than that, we were granted regulatory approval for the ANADA, which is the generic equivalent. We applied for bioequivalency to the originally licensed product Rumensin, and that's what we were granted by FDA. So in terms of what went into that, I'm going to let Dr. Munson speak maybe more specifically to the data submission. What was included, including I think a pretty hallmark study with live animal at a scale I believe larger than any other product that's been approved on the market. So Marissa, you want to add a bit more detail?
Yeah, so just to talk a little bit about some of the approval process and what went into that. We have kind of three phases, and I can address the phase that Scott's alluding to, which is kind of the clinical endpoint study. So when we put this product, Monovet 90, in animals in feedlot steers, and we also put the comparable product, Rumensin, into feedlot steers, and then we had a control group which had no Monensin in it at all. We had two studies done. One of them is what we call a pilot study, and that was roughly around 900 animals. So that's comparatively pretty large for a pilot study to be able to track average daily gain as well as intake data, and then finally measure feed conversion and feed to gain information on those groups. And then we did another study after this original pilot study that was what we call a pivotal clinical endpoint study. And again, this is a large-scale study involving, it was 60 pens of steers, and there were 10 head per pen, so roughly 600 animals that were divided into three treatment groups. One of them is the Monovet group, the other one is a Rumensin group, and the other one is a control group, which does not receive any Monensin in the feed. So as far as the scale of these types of studies, this is, as Scott said, one of the larger in sizes in terms of sample size. So we feel pretty confident in the data quality coming out of these studies because we were able to reproduce the performance data twice in two separate studies, basically.
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Monovet 90 has been available internationally prior to the U.S., correct?
So you're partially correct. the API, or the active ingredient of the our Monensin sodium. So I should say, we're basic in the manufacture and fermentation, like we both mentioned, of Monensin sodium at our fermentation plant in Bulgaria. That active or API is utilized in different finished products or blended products throughout the world. I think dozens of countries is probably the most accurate way to state that. Monovet 90 is the trade name, the brand name for the U.S. market. It is marketed under different brand names in different countries. The blend could be slightly different depending on the country, but the active or the API in Monovet 90 has been being utilized in multiple markets across the globe for some time.
And when you say the blend, are you talking about a carrier that helps dilute it down?
Exactly. So that's when, for example, when our competition makes Rumensin, right? They receive the active from somewhere, the API, and then they blend it up into the 90 gram per pound product, which is marketed to feed mills and feed manufacturers. The same goes with Monovet 90. We receive the active and then blend it up into Monovet 90 at our plant in St. Louis, which blending meaning, as you say, combine with carriers, a couple simple carriers, to get it to the concentration that's approved in the market.
So the carriers are different depending on what countries and what access you have to different carriers.
I think that's probably the best way to put it. Exactly. So for us, I don't think it's anything proprietary. It's rice hulls and what is it, sodium, or I forget the other one, and some mineral oil. Yeah.
Calcium carbonate.
Calcium carbonate. Thank you, Dr. Munson.
Thank you. So when you guys came into the market and we talked about, Animal Nutrition Systems carrying your product and discussing some of those things, a lot of questions came up about comparing you to your competitor that's been in the market forever.
Right.
And some of the questions that came up were, and maybe I'll just go ahead and jump and refer this to Dr. Munson unless you have something to add prior to that. But the FDA approval process, one of the criticisms, I guess, or if people poke holes at anything, is that you guys don't have a study in your FDA approval on lactating cows and performance on lactating cows.
Yes, we don't currently. That is in a direction that we're currently evaluating whether or not we want to do, and I anticipate in the future we will likely wind up doing a lactating cow trial. I think it's worth pointing out, though, that within the data itself, there may not be a milk cow trial yet and data available for that, but some of the other information coming out of the FOI, or the original studies that were done in this approval process, were not actually done for the original Pioneer product. So this we did something called a comparative dissolution study, which basically compares the physical and chemical properties of Monovet 90 to Rumensin in a variety of different pH ranges intended to simulate conditions in the rumen and the intestine. And so we have clear indication that these products behave similarly in a controlled lab environment and also in an animal, in the in vitro and the in vivo trials. So the argument is that the data that we have available from this approval is actually more extensive than that was required from the original Pioneer product. So we have every reason to believe that the performance benefits and production data that would come out of a lactating trial would be comparable to the competitor product.
And that's been shown overseas as well in different countries where you feed Monovet, or a version of Monovet 90?
I would have to investigate that a little bit further. I'm not sure, again, because the formulation is slightly different, whether or not we have that data to share with folks.
Okay.
I've seen other animal performance studies. I don't know that I've honed in on a lactating cow study quite yet. I think it is, if you look at the label that it was approved by the FDA, right? All indications, performance benefits, health benefits, all of that is identical on our label to what the originally licensed product is. And the FDA was happy to grant that based on the chemical and biological bioequivalency of the product. Mm-hmm. So, chances are over time we'll do a lactating cow study. As we came out of the gate, no, we don't have one yet.
Okay.
But I would say monensin sodium is monensin sodium.
Okay. The API you keep referring to, the active portion of the product, you guys make it in Bulgaria and you sell that globally. I think you told me on the phone that it was like you're one of the leading.
Yeah, so my understanding is, so for sure we sell that internationally, globally. I think we utilize it in our own products, and I believe we're the supplier to other manufacturers of blended products as well. Internationally, we are by quite a little ways the international market leader in terms of active monensin sodium. The number I've heard is just over 50% market share, and when you put that into perspective and understand that in some countries there's 4, 6, 8 monensin sodium products on the market, if you have a 50% market share internationally, that means that you're probably out in front of the next closest by quite some way.
Okay. So your entire FDA approval took you how many years?
Here it was somewhere over a decade. I've heard, I think it's somewhere 12 or 13 actually, to be specific.
Okay. All right. So, again, when you're a new product, I'm just going to keep asking you questions about comparisons.
You should, yeah.
So, and I think that's what the listeners want to know is the questions or the things that they hear that are good or bad. So another thing that I heard about the difference between your competitor and Monovet 90 is the dust factor of it, if you want to call it that, or the thickness of it, or the density of the product is probably the appropriate word.
Yep, and if you do, it's actually, so I think it's a natural, I think I asked that question when I first saw the two products side by side. So if you look at them physically, if you put both on a white paper towel or a white Kleenex, Rumensin is slightly darker in color than Monovet 90, and then if you take that Kleenex and empty it or pour each product off, there will be more of the monensin particles stuck to the Kleenex than the Monovet. So at first I asked, I remember sitting in rooms like, well, what about dustiness? So it's not that we don't have any mineral oil, okay? Mm-hmm. We have some mineral oil. We don't have as much, and that was done intentionally. So the reason we formulated the blended product the way we do is to actually improve flowability and mixability, and we have a belief that over time customers will in fact realize that and appreciate that versus Rumensin. The dust thing is, I don't know how to put this kindly, but I think it's a story in the marketplace intended to create some doubt. Feedback from customers, actual customers utilizing product both through mills or micro machines, has been that there may be slightly more dust, but certainly nothing that's not manageable, and nothing that's actually generated a complaint to this day. Dr. Munson, are you aware of any specific complaints from actual customers that have come in to us regarding dust in mills?
Not at all. And I would say my observations are largely consistent with Scott, that yes, the product initially on appearance looks slightly dustier, but does not really have any impact, or I have not heard of any impact on milling, pelleting, etc.
Okay.
I have heard the observation in terms of density. So if you look at a pallet of Monovet versus a pallet of Rumensin, the pallet of Monovet with the same number of bags is slightly taller. And so it's slightly less dense, I guess. It doesn't pack as much. Again, it was by no mistake that we formulated the way that we did.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. What else have you heard out there going into this market new with a new product and coming to compete against your competitor? What have you heard the criticisms that you maybe need to debunk or need to or have an argument for, I guess?
Yeah, so I think it's a good question, good call out. I think by no means am I trying to throw shade at Elanco or Rumensin. Rumensin's a proven quality product that's been on the market for a long time, right? If I were in Elanco's shoes, I would probably ask a lot of the same questions and get to try to seed a little bit of doubt in people's minds when there was an alternative finally coming to the market. I think one of the best ones was, and to their credit, my understanding, they have convened groups of nutritionists and given a presentation throughout the country on multiple occasions that demonstrates Elanco's ability to consistently manufacture Rumensin within tight variances to the 90.7 grams per pound concentration that's on the label, right? And if I'm citing, this is third hand, so I don't want to misstate, but a nutritionist told me that they cite that they have consistently been able to manufacture Rumensin at about a 2.5% variance to that 90.7 gram, which is good. I think that's a tight variant. FDA, to my surprise, only requires you to be 15%, I believe, on either side of 90.7, which is really broad. That's a wide range.
So from 90.7, it's plus or minus 15%.
Exactly.
And you said that the criticism on yours is that you're...
No. So they are, Rumensin is 2.5. FDA requires 15 on either side, right? So we dug, and again, we don't have thousands or tens of thousands of lot samples yet in the product life cycle, right, to be able to share data-wise. We do have several dozen at this point, growing every day as we manufacture more and we sell more. Of the lot samples that we've manufactured so far and that we've released for sale, so it's important to point out we have to sample every lot for quality assurance and to make sure that it stays close to that 90.7. Of the several dozen that we have sampled, so far they've averaged 89.6 grams per pound, which is a 1.5% variance. We believe that will only grow tighter as time goes on. The outliers will become more noticeable, but so far we're tracking, very consistently and a very high quality.
Good. Any other?
No, it's, so this is in terms of variant. I think when it comes down to it, this comes to, it's a cost savings, but when generics come out, I think a lot of times there's a market expectation that it's going to be, a drastic cost savings. Everybody needs, at the producer level, I think people need to realize that it's tough to build a huge savings into a product that only costs 2.5 cents, 2 to 3 cents per head per day to feed in the first place. Saying that, it does represent a savings, and more importantly, competition's good for the market, right? So I think the market became accustomed to normal or regular annual Monovet price increases for many years. I think it's fairly safe to say that the market has seen its end of annual price increases from this point going forward. And that happens whenever a competitive market or a competitive product enters a marketplace where previously there was no competition. So we're happy to be that first competitor. Likely down the road there will be others, but we wanted to make sure to bring a very, very high quality equivalent product that created a competitive cost saving force in the marketplace, and we think we've done that with Monovet 90.
Dr. Munson, in regards to some of the questions about your competitor having a bunch of peer-reviewed journal articles and over the last 30 years or whatever, proving that it works. I understand that with the FDA, you guys had to do more extensive work, prove more about your product than probably what they had to back when they began their FDA approval. But what can you tell us what you see coming for Monovet 90, and what would be your discussion about not having as many or not having the peer-reviewed journals to justify as well?
Well, again, I think that the body of research that's come out on the benefits of Monensin in beef and dairy diets over the last almost 40 years, I think that's obviously well established. I foresee us, as far as taking this product, is investigating new combinations. We already have approvals for other medicated combinations of Monovet, and in the foreseeable future, I can see us taking some of our other additives as well as other established additives in the marketplace and seeing how we can achieve better efficiencies with combinations of Monensin with other, like I said, medicated or non-medicated additives contributing, sort of building out that body of research. How can we get further efficient, more efficient than we currently are? For instance, there's some data out there demonstrating the reduction in methane, rumen-produced methane, from feeding ionophores, and given the pressures on animal ag to be more environmentally friendly. So I foresee us being able to investigate how Monensin and Monovet 90 can be utilized with other emerging additives to get better in terms of our production goals and animal health benchmarks.
In comparing, my understanding is there's certain things that Monovet 90, certain circumstances that Monovet 90 is approved and able to be fed in, and certain ones that are not yet, like Rumensin. Is that correct? Or are you guys or is all the approvals already done for the ways you can feed Rumensin regarding beef, lactating, and other animals? Or
Yep.
For now, they are. Yeah, the current round, there have been a couple rounds of approvals. For now, we've rolled out several. I think there are a total of 20 different combinations currently with 84 associated Bluebird labels on our website. But I can envision us continuing to build on that for sure.
And I think, so Marissa, correct me if I'm wrong, but in terms of all feeding, classes, in terms of different classes of livestock, different stages of production, Rumensin and Monovet 90 carry the same label, correct?
That is correct. That is absolutely correct. As far as the labeling and indications, you will find that, and if you could actually compare the labels, they're identical.
Okay. What can you tell me about the quality standards in Bulgaria where the API is created?
Yeah, good. Yeah, I don't know that I have a lot of specifics. I can tell you that our plants have to be both GMP as well as FDA certified. So something I left out early on is that the plant in Raskard, or I may get the cities confused. I haven't been over there yet, but it gained FDA approval, I believe. Not on that first chunk in the 50, but with Tylosin, but it became FDA approved. Marissa, if you've got the timeline in front of you, that would help. But I think it was like somewhere prior to 2000. Am I correct there?
I don't know if I have the timeline.
She's digging too. The bottom line is that even though that it's in Bulgaria, in order to market into the U.S. market, all quality assurance standards, all FDA guidelines have to be adhered to there, just as they would here.
Okay.
I mentioned also is, remember, that's one portion of the product, right? Is the active. The other aspect of it is the blended product, and that's made at our plant in St. Louis, Missouri, which I think I mentioned briefly.
Yeah. So on that topic of St. Louis, Missouri, why don't you share with the audience what you're doing there and what the goal is and what you've started for production and where you're at in your U.S. supply?
Yeah, so it just came online when we first started marketing into the U.S. market. The St. Louis plant wasn't completely scaled up yet. It went through a scale up remodel, if you will, as well as expansion, and came online roughly 60 days ago. It is now up to speed and going, and basically can make as much Monovet 90 as what we get active supplied from Bulgaria. So that's the other part of the puzzle, or part of the formula, right, is how much active will come from Bulgaria. Bulgaria just went through a scale up in terms of addition of fermenters. Like I said, I have not been to Bulgaria yet. One of my colleagues went, just hosting a major feed company to Bulgaria to look at different capacities that we have in different feed ingredient sectors, and came back actually almost surprised at the quality of our facilities there. So that's easy to say. It's not just a rundown, rusty old plant. My understanding is, and pictures I've seen, is it's truly a world-class production facility. Reports are that it's that, and at a bare minimum, we have to meet all requirements that anybody else here has to meet.
Okay, great. What, getting to the end of my questions here, and then I'll just let you guys throw in whatever you have else to say about your company and the products you're providing now here, or the products you're providing here. But when it first came out that this was approved, there was a lot of, and you kind of touched to it earlier, there was a lot of optimism in the idea that you guys would be 20% cheaper. Can you talk to that a little bit? Obviously, you said that competitors are great to have, and I think that's
right.
a good point. But what is your goal in all of that pricing structure, and how do you obviously think you have an equivalent or better product for a little bit lower price, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and I think that's the way to put it. We feel we have an equivalent product, and in terms of our initial launch, you're right. I think the expectations in the market were like a huge discount to the originally licensed product. So in reality, we were quite limited in terms of supply right out of the gate. So there was absolutely no reason to drop the price any more than we had to, or any more than the supply that we had right out of the gate. We were just receiving product from Bulgaria, finished product at that point, and came out at a price point roughly, I don't even know if we were quite 10% under the originally licensed product. That allowed us to achieve our sales goals that we needed to at the time. In terms of where we will be going forward, I would say that the price point will reflect both our supply as well as what the competition does. So, everybody wants everything very, very cheap, but we're all in business. We want to certainly realize the value from our investments that have been made over the years, over a very long period of time. But it's a competitive marketplace, right? We need to sell what we can make, and we'll price it accordingly.
Okay. Dr. Munson, do you have anything on your end that you'd like to add, or tell our audience of dairymen and nutritionists, or dairy women, I should say, about your products?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to revisit the question that you brought up earlier about sort of dispelling myths or misinformation, and one of the issues that we've noticed in the market is that some questions concerning the product support for Monovet. So I just wanted to kind of discuss a little bit about what sort of technical services and support we offer. So myself and 4 other veterinarians, as well as our technical service nutritionists, also operate our feed assaying service. We have an analytical laboratory in St. Louis, where mills and producers can submit feed, type C, mixed TMR, or if you're a mill and you want to submit like a calf grain or something like that for verification of monensin levels and your Monovet levels, we certainly are in a place to be able to do that. So we're working actively at the producer level and also at the mill level to be able to help folks be able to optimize that and make sure that they're aware of that service as part of being a Huvepharma Monovet customer.
Great. That's great for everyone to know. Scott, you got anything else you want anyone to know?
I think we covered most of it, here and there throughout the conversation. I'll just reiterate, our goal was to bring a very high quality monensin sodium option to the marketplace, and I think we've done that with Monovet 9D. We were granted bioequivalency in our ANADA license from the FDA. We know we have a standard to meet in terms of product support, which Dr. Munson just did a nice job of referring to, both with tech service, field sales personnel, as well as the feed assay service. Those are all in place and available to mills, nutritionists, producers alike. We've alluded to it, we've hit on it on a few times, but I think it's really, really important to understand. And this is, again, no fault of Elanco when they went for the original license and registration and got their approval. But we're at a different point in 2019, almost 2020, than they were at that point in time. And so the regulatory standards to meet in order to gain approval, I assure you, are much more rigorous in today's time than they were then. And so we don't just say that we met everything. We met, a much higher standard than was originally required at that point in time. And so I think that basic understanding, or pointing that out and realizing the approval that we were granted with an equivalent label, with equivalent indications, now a full set of combination approvals, which aren't as critical in the dairy market but are absolute have-to-haves in the feed yard market, I think speaks that no, this is a good equivalent choice and option to Rumensin, and that's what we want it to be. We want it to be a choice, right? And ultimately a competitive option in the marketplace, bring costs down, and it started to do so, and I think it will continue to go in that direction.
Great. So what can we expect from Huvepharma in 2020?
Yeah, so I think you'll see a continued broadening of efforts. I don't think anybody has even seen any type of a branding exercise at this point. You'll see the name Monovet 90 and Huvepharma become much more prevalent. And so one is just more visibility, right? You'll see us support Monovet 90 as it needs to be supported in the marketplace. And you may see another product approval within the 2020. I don't know in terms of impact on the dairy business, but there are other major compounds in our pipeline that will pair well with Monovet, and those things will be coming as well.
Great. Well, can you guys wrap it up by letting our listeners know where they can find more information on Monovet 90 on the web?
Sure. Dr. Munson, if you're sitting in front of the computer, why don't you give that address?
All right. Okay, let me pull it up real quick. All right. It is at Huvepharma, HUVEPHARMA.US. And it's under products, should say Monovet 90. Has all of the labeling information as well on our website, so please visit.
Great. Well, thank you both for Dr. Munson being on the phone call, Scott for being present for this podcast. I'm excited for our viewers to learn more about this exciting product that, is obviously helping them save a little money and at least have a competitive market, with Monensin. And I appreciate your time and your effort. And I'm sure if our listeners have any more questions, they can also reach out to Animal Nutrition Systems, and we can put them in touch with you.
We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.